Well, hey, everybody. Welcome back to another week of the Fixate Binge Podcast. I am, of course, your host, Joe. I'm excited that you're here with us. I have had a really good time reviewing these films, seeing some great films coming down the pike. And I wanted to share with you my latest experience going to the cinema this week. I took my two older kids who are ages 21 and 17. They had wanted to see the new film by Kane Parsons BACKROOMS. Now, they had wanted to see it, I think, because there was an awareness of the viral videos on YouTube that Kane Pixels, as his YouTube handle is. His real name, of course, is Kane Parsons. My kids are aware of that. My oldest, my son, has actually watched some of the BACKROOMS viral videos. So there was a built-in interest to see what all the hubbub was about. Now, of course, this has been a very interesting phenomenon at the cinema in horror this year, and that's what this episode is going to talk about. But if I could just tell you a few things. We get to the cinema. It was pretty packed, pretty sold out. I could only really find 3 seats where we could sit together in the very front row of the Regal Cinema here in Modesto. So I don't typically like to sit in the very front row, and it really just depends on the actual cinema you're going to. These days, most cinemas build the first row, wisely build the first row. It seems like they've done some research on this, talked to chiropractors and things like that, and have determined that if they can push the first row 10 to 15 feet from the screen, that's not too oppressive for people to enjoy a film. In the case of BACKROOMS, we did end up getting the front row. We were, dead center, front row. And it really aesthetically worked in terms of the viewing experience because of how immersive the interior set design of the film was when it came to the film BACKROOMS. And so that kind of worked. But what I wanted to kind of grumble about a little bit is just the etiquette of people coming out to movies. And I'm usually targeting the younger crowd, but I got to tell you, there's been some adults that are just so poorly behaved, such ignorance, real lack of awareness, a lack of courtesy, a lack of any type of shame to come into a cinema and talk during the whole movie or play on your phone. And I'm sure if you're listening to this and you go to the cinema, this is one of the main reasons why you're rethinking going to the cinema. I would think yes, the cinema has extremely exorbitant prices for confectionery like popcorn and drink. I mean, my goodness, so expensive. But if you could bypass all of that, the other main concern is the behavior of complete strangers in the dark about how to behave when a film is on. Some people, and I'm not saying anything new here, some people seem to feel that they're sitting at home on their living room couch, scrolling on their phone, talking during a movie, oblivious to everyone else. And the difference is that we've all paid the price of admission. We've all paid to have an experience at the cinema, and I don't really care what your conversation is. And if you can't shut up, then you don't need to be there. And I feel like confronting strangers in the cinema is the responsibility of the staff. And oftentimes when I go into the lobby, and I've done this, I go into the lobby and I talk to the staff look as anxious and terrified as any of us would be to confront complete strangers. We live in a very volatile time. There always is some sort of a horrible nightmare story about somebody confronting people and telling them to keep it down, and they get stabbed or shot or beaten to a pulp. That's happened. I mean, it's happened. It's a concern. And so when you're confronting complete strangers, you don't know what you're stepping into. And, you also don't want to be seen as the tough guy, laying down the law with complete strangers. It's a little bit like waking somebody up during sleepwalking, or you're not supposed to do it. And I kind of feel that way when it comes to confronting people. I have confronted people. I have told people to keep it down or stop talking or, shush them. And in most cases it works. But I got to tell you, there's an awful lot of anxiety that builds up within me doing that, especially if I'm out with my kids, because they don't want to see dad confront people. They don't want to see that. So I'm watching Backrooms with my 3 kids, and we'll get into the whole viewing experience in just a minute, what that film was like later in this episode. But I'm watching it, and about 25 minutes into the film, a family shows up. We thought we had the entire front row to ourselves. A family shows up 2 seats down from us, and they fill up the rest of the row. And it looked like a single mom and 5 tweens, teenagers sitting there. And they played on their phones in the front row. They played Snapchat. They had the flashlights on in their phone. They giggled and laughed and chortled and clucked. And it was really distracting. And I was trying to enjoy the film. I was so annoyed. My kids were annoyed. It didn't ruin the film because fortunately, we were able to kind of hyper focus on the film, as it were. But, it's unnecessary. There should be etiquette. I wish that we had an Alamo Draft House, because from what I've heard from one of my past guests, Adam Cromashow, who is known as Sunset Loner on TikTok, Instagram. And by the way, Sunset Loner, you got to follow this guy. He sees every movie. He sees probably 200 movies. He goes to the film festivals all over the United States. He is dialed in, but he has been to the Alamo Draft House, which is a theater chain, a cinema theater chain. And their staff will not put up with it. They'll throw you out. They literally will it's like a company policy. If you can't keep quiet, if you can't turn your phone off during the screening, they'll just make you leave. No questions about it and no refund. When we watch films at the cinema, there's always that obligatory, please make sure your cell phones are on silent. And that's kind of doing the job of the staff, right? But I don't see too much enforcement of that. I really wish that there would be more random cinema checks, like the staff would come in, sit in the back, stand in the walkway a little bit out of eye line of the guests in the theater, and just make sure that everything is moving swimmingly, especially during a crowded screening, because it was pretty crowded. I wish they did that, but maybe they're not being paid enough. Maybe, on top of everything else, maybe we're just not paying the staff enough, or it's not being managed well at your location. I used to work in a cinema. I used to work at the Picture House Cinema in England during my grad studies, and more than a few times I assisted the staff getting rowdy people out of the cinema. I even had to one time insist a couple leave the cinema for performing sex acts on each other. I didn't see anything, but I heard that that's what was going on in the back row, and a mom with some kids saw it and was horrified by it. And they're very lucky we didn't call the police and have them all arrested for public indecency. It happens. It's a thing. So I don't know what to say about that. I don't have an easy solution, because I don't want to give off the impression that I'm suggesting that you stand up for what is right, and on behalf of everyone else, take it upon yourself to confront the rowdy people. You might get a knuckle sandwich. You might be visiting the dentist afterwards. You might be going to the ER with a puncture wound or a stab wound. You don't know what people are prepared to do when they're cornered and embarrassed. And there are some really awful people out there. So, if it's happening at your cinema, maybe keep shopping until you find a cinema where the staff are a little bit more proactive about maintaining a respectful environment, where when we all assemble as complete strangers in a cinema to have a communal, collective experience with a film, we can all enjoy it instead of hearing someone talk on their phone or scroll through TikTok or social media or play or giggle or whatever it is that they're doing that's distracting to you. So, I guess I'm beating a dead horse there. I don't want to quite sound like the old man on his porch yelling at people to get off his lawn. But when you're paying what we're paying to watch films like this crap wouldn't fly at an opera, it wouldn't fly at a professional theater production. And to be honest with you, most of those artistic events wouldn't attract a wider demographic of people that would behave like that in the first place. If I want people to be rowdy, I'll go to a tractor pull. I'll go to a concert, a rock concert or maybe an R&B concert or something. I'll go to those things. I don't care. Noise is part of the show. It's audience participation. Audience rowdiness is part of the show. But, I may not like the sport of golf, but I sure wish that I could go to the movies with the people who go and watch golf, because they're very quiet. anyway, it didn't quite spoil the entire experience. My kids loved the film. I can't stop thinking about it. I've written a review for it on Letterboxd. I can't wait to dive into a couple other things. The show that you have heard me talk about the last couple episodes, but I urge you, if you still are reluctant to take my advice, stop equivocating. Go and watch it. If you have Apple TV, you need to watch Widow's Bay. It is phenomenal, phenomenal, phenomenal television making. It's very, very good. It's got all the uncomfortable and chilling elements of Midnight Mass, which is my favorite horror TV series that's come out in the last 15, 20 years. It's got all the elements of that. It's even got one of the main actors from that show shows up in this show. But it's got humor to it as well. So it's having fun, and it's showing that you can have fun and still scare the crap out of people. So I urge you to check that out. There's 7 episodes available right now. I think the finale, I'm not sure, maybe there's 10 episodes this season, but the 8th episode is coming out, I think, maybe Tuesday of this next week. So don't miss it. Highly enjoyable, very, very fun of a TV series, especially if you like kind of dark type themes and things like that. This is a very well done show. And I'll say the same about another show on Netflix, The Burrows. I've only got through 1 episode of it, or is it 2? I can't remember. And that too is very, very good. It's a little bit more slowly developed than Widow's Bay, but it's also very, very good. And I really just want to talk on this episode about what's happening with horror lately. I think the horror genre is the hottest genre in cinema right now. It's really having a moment. Now, the last year or so, off and on, I'll say that I've said on this podcast, I'll say, horror is having a renaissance at the cinema right now. And it really is. And I wanted to explore a few reasons why. And I think it has a lot to say about our society, about our culture, where we are culturally. But I also think it has something to say a little bit about where we are financially, how Hollywood is being financed right now. What particular genres are struggling and what particular genres are thriving. And so, I have made the point that I haven't exactly made this point, but I think political correctness has kind of hurt comedy at the cinema. We don't get as much comedies like we used to. We used to get, quite a lot of landmark comedies 20 years ago. And I think political correctness has kind of soured what we find funny today. And so I feel that certain genres of film, it really just ebbs and flows depending on where our culture is at. So one of the things I wanted to delve into again here is I want to look at like 3 reasons why horror is so hot. And one, this isn't a lesson, this isn't a lecture, I'm just shooting from the hip. But one of the things that you can always say about horror is that it usually has an analogy, or it is usually connected to or has something to say about the current culture, the current political climate that we're in. So if you, for example, and I'm spitballing here, and there's far better examples of this. So Invasion of the Body Snatchers, the original Invasion of the Body Snatchers. Well, what was going on in the 1950s? Well, the Red Scare, communism, you might be brainwashed. Even the term brainwashed, I think, proliferated after World War II and really took off during the Cold War. You could be brainwashed. You could be replaced. Your thinking could be completely turned off, and you could become this automaton that spouts off Bolshevik and Lenin ideas. And those types of things really took off. You can also look at what horror was during the 1980s and how things were quite graphic and quite on the nose. But I think that was a remnant of where we were after Vietnam War. You've got, Texas Chainsaw Massacres. You've got these slasher flicks. Friday the 13th started in the late 70s, early 80s. These are people that have seen the horrors of war, and we're living in a horrific society that sees these types of things. And I also think now that if you look at the latest crop of horror films, where are we as a country? And I think we're in a darker place. I don't think we're in a graphically darker place, but I think we're in a darker place where I'm seeing a lot more horror films that are really connecting with audiences, that challenge reality, that challenge fate, that challenge destiny. Are we able to control our destiny, or is there an AI algorithm that's controlling it for us? A lack of choice. And I think, this is allegorized in the content that we're seeing. And of course, you're probably thinking, well, Obsession is a great example, a fantastic example that questions agency and consent. I am looking at where we are as a country, where even agreeing on objective reality with certain people, and I'm probably saying it a little bit more on the nose here politically, is debatable. We live in the information age, people. Everything that we need to know about the world around us can be accessed at the click of a button. And yet, why can't people just agree on what is truth, what is fact, and what is fiction? And I think it's because the internet's not regulated the way it should be. That just because you have a stupid, inane thought like the earth is flat, or the election was stolen in 2020 from Donald Trump, or the moon landing was faked, you might have that individual thought, but what the internet did was connect you to other people that think the same thing. And so what it's done is it's brought groups of people together, and so you have groupthink. You've got people that are in a giant online echo chamber. This is kind of where Pizzagate and 4chan proliferated this and pushed this. And you've got people that can tell you they're convinced that there are lizard people that have replaced real people on Earth right now, that there's a cabal of liberals and Democrats who eat babies and things. You think I'm kidding? This is a real thing. Lots of people believe it. So, how has this been reflected in horror? And I think there's a lot of examples, better examples than I can give, of people being manipulated, of their reality being manipulated, of their freedom of choice being manipulated. That we're seeing that. Those are the types of subjects that seem to be connecting now with audiences. And I'm thinking, of course, of Get Out, by Jordan Peele. I'm thinking, of course, of Us. Us is a great example of being replaced by a doppelganger, a terrible version of us, also by Jordan Peele. I'm thinking of, those types of subjects are connecting with audiences because they are allegorized by what's happening in society now. There's so much uncertainty. There's environmental uncertainty, there's political uncertainty, there's even agency uncertainty. AI is unstoppable. I mean, at this point, I'm willing to look at the first Terminator film by James Cameron. It's more of a documentary than a fiction because we didn't listen, and look what's happening. Machines are starting to take over. And there's a real sense of, we feel a little bit untethered to what is real and what do we have control over. This is, in some way, it might seem like end stage capitalism, where you're just a cog. You're just a cog in this giant behemoth, this giant leviathan, this economic leviathan that pushes and pulls. I'm completely spitballing here, but I'm telling you, this isn't happening in a vacuum. The types of films today that are connecting with audiences has a lot to say because of what is going on in the world today. So I think that's one reason why horror is really connecting with people. And you couldn't say that that's exclusive to now. There have been, like I said earlier, there have been eras throughout cinema history in the last 100 years where horror has absolutely connected with people. And even prior to that, Mary Shelley's Frankenstein still sells 40,000 books a year. And I don't think that's just because schools are buying up batches to force kids to read them. There has always been, throughout Victorian times until now, there has been an interest in the macabre or, the writings of Poe or whatever because of what it says about society. And maybe that's just us looking for meaning behind everything. Maybe some things are just don't have meaning. But when it connects to a wider demographic, when a wider demographic connects with something and finds something very interesting and supported, and it succeeds, whether in literary print or at the cinema, then I think that's saying something. I mean, I think a wider comment is being made. I think that the Saw movies, the pejorative torture porn Saw movies, proliferated because of the crap that ISIS and Al Qaeda were putting on the internet with these beheadings and horrible dismemberments for entertainment to horrify the Western world. I think that's exactly what happened. You can look at that and say, I mean, that stuff turns my stomach. I'm not interested in that. It disgusts me. But I think the popularity of those shows has absolutely, you can absolutely draw a link to what was happening during the Iraq War and some of the horrors and war crimes that were happening at that time. So I think that's probably the best way to put it. Is I think certain different elements of horror, whether it's folk horror or it's surreal horror or just general horror itself. I think look carefully at what's being said. Look carefully at what the stories are about and what audiences are connecting with, and that will tell you. That'll usually tell you what's happening in the world today. Don't look too far. You'll probably see an example of why something like that is connecting with people. The second reason, and it's the big reason, some might even say it's the most important reason, is because of the cost. The cost of horror. It only give you some perspective here. Let's just look at, let's say, for instance, Curry Barker's Obsession. I've talked about that. That came out just a couple weeks ago. Curry Barker's Obsession. Great film, right? This guy was picked up from YouTube. He's 26 years old, by the way. Okay? So if you're ever feeling like whatever, you're too old to give up, you're wrong. You can always give up. Look what Curry Barker did at 26. He's 26 years old. He's been making a lot of videos on YouTube, and he comes out with Obsession, and it's an original, fascinating story. He made it for $750,000, okay? It's a pretty big budget for the first-time filmmaker. That film, in less than 3 weeks, has made over $100 million. Now, I'm not a businessman. Maybe you are. I don't play the stock market. Maybe you do. But I know a thing or two about ROI, return on investment. That's a hell of a return on investment. It really is. And the film's not done yet. It's still in the cinema. And before it gets to digital or before you can buy copies of it, it has a lot more money to make. $100 million on a $750,000, but it made its money back 100 times over. And it did it without any major A-list stars. There's no A-list stars eating up a fifth of the budget. It's just an interesting story about manipulation and agency and consent. All the things that women today feel are being taken away from them in the current political climate, where we're rolling back women's rights and we're taking away a lot of their freedom of choice. Yeah, that's why I think this film is connected so well the way it has. It's frightening. And as a father of 2 daughters, it terrifies me. The country my daughters are growing up with. I certainly hope the pendulum swings back sharply the other way, starting this November in the midterms, right? But this is why this film has really connected, because of what's going on in America right now. But it's financially a windfall. $750,000, $100+ million at the box office. And it's not done yet. And this is the first feature-length film he's made in the cinema. First film he's ever made for the cinema, right? And if you think that that's an isolated incident, well, again, Kane Parsons Backrooms that me and my 2 older kids saw just last night, that was on a budget of $10 million. Okay, $10.4 million. Pretty high. It's actually made $120 million in the last 72 hours globally in the cinema. So it's made its money back 10 times over, and it's not done yet. It might be the runaway financial hit of the summer. So, and again, the director is only 20 years old. 20 years old, also from YouTube. So I'm looking at I mean, there's another film called Iron Lung, which was self-financed, and this was all put together by this guy who wrote, directed it, and distributed it. I think he made it for like $60,000, and that thing has made $50 million. That might be, and that was last year. That might be the most financially successful film of 2025. So what we're seeing here is that, when you think about these large tentpole studios that put out, I'm going to make the next Marvel superhero film, and it's going to have a budget of $250 million, and it's going to have to make this much money at the cinema to earn it back, and then and only then can we start to earn some money. These films are being made for $400 million. I think the budget for the next Avengers film is like $500 million or something astronomical. And yeah, it's going to make its money back because it has relatability and it has a built-in audience for it. Even if it's not a critical success, it's going to make its money back for it. But it's not going to make 100 times its money back, is it? And it's high risk. And you've got the cast is peppered with A-list talent. So you're having to pay a sizable chunk of your budget to pay for that. And horror isn't requiring that. Horror isn't built on movie stars. It's really a genre that's not designed for movie stars. It may make movie stars because of how great the films are, but the film genre itself is not designed for, A-list talent, for movie stars. In fact, some might even think it's you're sliding back. If you have to do a horror film, you're almost like, acquiescing to do it, right? But that's the great thing about horror, is that financially, it is the safest genre at the cinema. Production costs are relatively low, and the returns, the odds of a good return are very high. And if there's one studio out there that seems to have its pulse on what audiences today are angling to see, it's A24 and Neon. Those two studios, and Blumhouse to an extent, but those studios seem to know what audiences are looking for. Does that make sense? Okay, so financial returns, and the great thing about it, there's a lot of creative freedom with that as well. That's why so many, you have studios taking chances on young, up and coming or completely unknown directors. People who've never been given a directing job before are being given decent amount of budgets if they have an interesting concept. And so the amount of creative freedom, and then contrast that, right, with some of these Marvel films or superhero films or large tentpole productions, there's not a lot of creative freedom at all. A lot of the plot points and how it's marketed and how the plot plays out, and that's a lot of that is done by committee, and test audiences, that I understand that, because those films are designed to make money. That's what they're for. But if you're looking for, usually in most cases, original storytelling that takes risks and takes chances, and it's in the cinema, it's probably horror. It's probably horror. So I can see why it's doing so well, and it's going to continue to do well. We had Weapons last year. Amy Madigan won Best Supporting Actress for Weapons. Michael B. Jordan in Sinners won Best Actor, right? Demi Moore, the year before that, was nominated for Best Actress for Substance, The Substance, which is a body horror, a Cronenberg-esque body horror film. Horror is having its moment, and it's having a critical moment as well, because when it's this successful and it's this popular, you can't ignore it. And that's really what it's about, is the cost relative to the return. And that's why horror is doing really well. The other third reason, I think, is the thrill factor. I really think that the internet is designed to thrill people. I really think it is. There are so many viral moments that can be surgically removed from some of these clips, clips that can be surgically removed from the films themselves, and the clip itself can go viral. you know, and that's how it self-perpetuates. You almost don't have to spend a large budget marketing the film, because social media and the viralness of social media will do that for you in many cases, especially if your content's good. You know, compared to, you'll hear stories like, oh yeah, James Cameron's Avatar film, a budget of $400 million, but it had a $200 million advertising budget. Why does it need $200 million to advertise it? If it's good, it should sell itself, right? And that's where horror is leading the way with the other genres in Hollywood right now. Horror is saying, you know, whether it's a jump scare, or it's just slow creeping horror or atmosphere or whatever it is, we can take a clip, we can surgically remove it from the rest of the film. We can make it go viral with some of these content creators that do their job better than I can ever do, that have much greater reach than I will ever have, you know, and suddenly that is doing the advertising for your film. I follow a couple content creators. They're not making a lot of money at all as TikTokers or social media people, but their recommendations, they matter to me. And if they're behind something, especially when it comes to horror, I'm on. I can't tell you how many horror films, I've lost count. I can't tell you how many horror films I've watched that I'd never heard of before. And I'd like to think I'm pretty dialed in, you know, because not everything comes to the cinema. A lot of it gets streamed. But I can't tell you how many films I've watched, because I saw a clip posted on a social media influencer that I follow, that I respect, that they endorsed it. Like, this is a great film. This will scare the crap out of you. You know, wear diapers when you watch this, you know. And that's one thing I think that horror does very, very well, is the cost of advertising is severely reduced. You do not hear of horror films with $200 or $300 million budgets. You don't hear that. And if you do, it's ripe for failure. It usually is. And I think Hollywood has learned the hard way. They have tried to make large, giant horror films with enormous budgets. You know, if you gave Guillermo del Toro everything he wanted, you would have a $300 million movie. So, and I love the guy because he made Frankenstein for Netflix, and that's Netflix money. That's Netflix money, but it was great. He did good. So those are the three reasons I think that horror is doing a hell of a job. But I really want to dive into, really briefly, the finances of where we're at. So I did some research on this. In 2023, so 3 years ago, horror movies accounted for more than 10% of the box office revenue, which is really double its share in the span of only a decade. So it's grown exponentially. Consider the Conjuring film, consider the Conjuring franchise, rather, which includes Annabelle, The Nun, and The Conjuring Last Rites. The last film, of course, The Last Rites, has generated over $450 million at the box office in 2025. And that cumulatively, the Conjuring film franchise has made $2.7 billion at the box office. That's mind-boggling. That's superhero money. That's crazy, right? 2017's It earned $700 million at the box office upon its release, spawning a sequel, which itself earned respectable $470 million, and spawned its own TV series, Welcome to Derry, which I highly recommend, which is fascinating, and in many ways surpasses both films, which at one point, I don't know where the money is on this, had 20 million watchers around the globe for HBO. I mean, you can get 20 million people to watch your content on TV. That's astonishing money. That's astonishing interest. In 2025, the horror genre itself generated over $2 billion at the box office. $1 billion, so 50% of that $2 billion around the world, $1 billion of it, half of it came from the United States market alone. And like I said earlier, Sinners, that earned $350 million at the box office. And Weapons earned $270 million at the box office. And of course, I talked about the Oscars and the critical acclaim that both those films garnered. And you really, like I said earlier at the beginning of this podcast, there's no sign of things slowing down at all. And then you look at the exorbitant amount of money that some of these lower and lesser known filmmakers who are being recruited right out of YouTube are making. I mean, these guys aren't even necessarily, graduates of film school. If you've got an interesting story, a fascinating topic, an interesting concept, and you can tell a story and work with a script writer, or you can write scripts, there's money there. There's an opportunity. There's a niche market that companies like A24 and Neon and Blumhouse, they'll read your script. And if you have a YouTube channel with a lot of pull, then you have built-in interest. And some of these producers can look at your audience engagement. They can look at how many followers you have and how many people are vibing with your content and determine from that alone, that is the market research. And they can decide, I think this has legs. I think that's exactly why Backrooms got greenlit for a 20-year-old with no filmmaking experience in terms of like a large crew and a set and respected actors like Chiwetel Ejiofor and Renate Rensvev and Rensvi, I can't remember how to say her name correctly, who did fantastic in Backrooms, and there it is. It's just amazing to me what horror is doing, and it's not done yet. We're only halfway through the year. And it seems like only a few years ago, the only good horror films that came out were timed for Halloween. We're getting so much horror now. Almost every other week, we're getting something. And we've had Send Help from Sam Raimi. We've had Hokum. We've had, what's his name? It did The Mummy. I can't remember. I can't remember the name of that. It's The Mummy. We've had so many great horror films just in the first half of 2026. We're only halfway through the year. We still got 6 more months to go. And I'm already thinking of some of the other films I can't wait to see. So for whatever it's worth, I think there's something to be said about horror today. You may not like horror. Some people don't. Some people don't like it. My wife is not a big fan of horror movies. Not a big fan. So when you hear that I go into the movies with my kids to see a lot of these horror films, it's not because I'm neglecting my wife. It's because my wife doesn't really have a big appetite for that type of content. Yes, we'll watch Walking Dead. Yes, we'll watch, like shows on TV that are horror adjacent. But in terms of going to the movies and watching some of these things, she doesn't really have as big an appetite for it as I do. I really go because of the catharsis. I really go because of I'm in a safe space and I can deal with the range of emotion and anxiety. It is like a roller coaster of emotions because especially if you can connect with the characters and connect with the story, you'll be in a dark theater connecting with the story and it'll take you somewhere. If you just allow yourself not to be distracted, just put your cell phone down, don't Snapchat, don't talk, but just focus, give it your deep focus. You can experience something in a safe environment. You can experience the horror. You can experience the terror, as it were. The Greeks did this during their tragedies. The Greeks did it. They really believed in the restorative and replenishing properties of going to see tragedies at the theater during Greek times. They believed it was catharsis. It was a cleansing way of, flushing out your emotions. It was psychologically restorative. And I think there's an element to that with horror films in the same way. We can feel when the curtain closes, or in this case at the cinema, when the credits roll and the lights come up and you can walk out of the cinema, you can be like, wow, okay, I'm back on terra firma. I'm back on firmer ground. Thank goodness that was just a movie. And that's kind of how I have felt several times this year. I can't believe it. I'm sitting here thinking, what are the best films I've seen this year? And out of like a dozen films that I've seen at the cinema this year, and I've seen a little more than a dozen, but about a dozen films, like 50% of them are horror films. That's shocking to me. I can't think of any year in my life where I've ever felt that way about films. So we're getting a lot of great content in horror. If you're new to horror, this is a great time to be alive. This is a great time to get into the genre. There's so many different things to do. And even some may say that Disclosure Day might be horror adjacent. It's a horrifying sci-fi film about aliens and, the government covering things up. That's horrific, can be. So anyway, I just thought I would share that with you. If you haven't been paying attention, horror is big. Horror is very big. It is having its moment. It's been having its moment for the last several years. It's been building, and it's not done yet. And I'm telling you, expect some critical acclaim to start continuing. Well, not start, but to continue at the award season. I would be surprised if all of these horror films got shut out, because there's been some fantastic writing, some fantastic set design, especially in Backrooms, and even some great acting in Indy Navarrete in Obsession. There's a viral thing going on. Everyone's like, if she's not nominated, the Academy's awards are a total joke. And I'm like, I agree with you. She did fantastic. I don't know what else is going to come out between now and then, and Oscar award season isn't for several more months, but she certainly did an amazing job. So anyway, that's the podcast for you today. I've got some more exciting things coming up. I am excited to have a co-host come, someone who's been on the podcast before. I can't wait for her to be here. She's so funny. She's so talented, and I won't tell you who it is, but it's going to be exciting. One last thing from me, do look after yourself. Do take care of yourself. Sometimes when we become a little too aware of things, or we become a little too educated, or a little too maybe even sophisticated, we know things. We might feel that we know too much. It can sometimes feel like we don't know where we fit in. My advice to that is just be yourself and be confident in who you are, and learn to love the person with all your warts and all your flaws. Learn to love who you are. I'm not asking you to be a narcissist. I'm asking you to give yourself grace, to be gentle in how you judge yourself, and to recognize that you are enough. Whatever you are doing with your life, as long as you're not hurting yourself or others, you're doing a great job. So don't forget that. And I'll leave that message with you, and I'll see you next week on the next episode of the Fixate Binge podcast. For now, you owe it to yourself to go see Obsession. I can't believe you haven't seen it yet after I've been praising it for the last couple episodes. Go see it, but don't sleep on Backrooms. Go and see that too. So anyway, that's enough for me. Have a good one. Bye-bye.